Greetings viewers, my object is to show you how you can't base all your knowledge on what YouTube influencers tell you. They often make mistakes. Please fact check what you are told, including what I tell you. My object is not to pick on this fellow, I love what he's setting out to do. Rather, it's to pick one case study for you out of a possible many. Let's go.
The quick collapse of France during World War II was a shock to many in the world. Its colonial empire was largely administered from a German puppet government of Vichy France.
Boner number one, it was pronounced Vichy, not Vichy. Now, unlike a lot of the people who leave comments on his video, I won't hammer his pronunciation much, because he is nearly deaf. But this one is a bit much.
In today's episode, we'll be looking at one of these conflicts, the Franco-Thai War. The fall of mainland France in mid-1940.
This is unusual. Most of the information he gives is correct.
Shocked many in the world, and some foreign powers saw this as an opportunity to themselves expand in influence.
And in one of his many praiseworthy moments, Tipsyfish shows the covert US training team instructing Ho Chi Minh and his Viet Minh anti-Japanese rebels before they became anti-American.
His forces couldn't hope to defend the territory, and that assistance from the mainland or even other colonies wasn't forthcoming.
But here's a fine example of his rather cavalier attitude to using relevant photos. This is a hideously irrelevant photo. There are many more to come.
On the
And cop this one. Far from showing help going from France to the colonies, this shows help going from the colonies to France and in a war 25 years before.
Them being naval basing rights at Guangzhou and the total closure of the Chinese border by July the 7th.
Banish any thought that the world of 1940 looked like the world of 1854.
On July the 3rd, and Anjou had over 50,000 men under his direct command, with over half of them being regulars.
No, it's Africa 45 years earlier. By the way, they smashed a well-armed 40,000 strong army, losing just 20 killed themselves. Despite what fuckwits tell you, the French are actually quite awesome.
While this force was the largest of any French colony at the time, it wasn't enough to deter the Japanese. Plans were drawn up, and yet another ultimatum issued on September the 20th.
Our suspicions are first aroused by the presence of a South Korean flag in the picture, something which at this point was only used by anti-Japanese rebels who would never be allowed to sit at a table with Japanese.
Enter the territory regardless of French response. Now, however, Thai Major General Phlak Pamsogram saw the weak governmental response to the Japanese occupation as a great way to get the land back that they wanted. Getting lukewarm acceptance from the Japanese, Phlak drew up plans for war. In November of 1940...
In reality, what you're seeing here, that ship he's talking about has already sailed long ago, and these guys are just attending a racist gab fest, barking at the moon about white equals bad, Asian equals good.
Thai units started probing Indochina's defenses with artillery strikes and border raids, with a full-on invasion starting in January the following year. Thai forces
my ass. These are obviously Americans.
were a mixture of Western and European material. The Air Force consisted of American-built Corsairs.
Help! No, they did not have the Chansport F4U Corsair. That's how you pronounce it, thank you. From the future. Sorry, this is big time.
And Curtiss Hawks, with a supplement of Japanese Mitsubishi bombers.
True, but they were not these gorgeous Mitsubishi Betty bombers. They were an earlier one, the KI-21, which doesn't have quite so elegant lines, but here it is in Thai markings, including those lovely elephants on the what would normally be roundels. And here's the Mitsubishi that they did have, and which did go into combat at this date. Good news, Tipsyfish, I forgot to add it to the boner count. You get one free.
The army fielded German crop guns and 30 British Vickers tanks.
Oh my god, that is a basic error. Thailand wouldn't know this tank existed. She used the Vickers 6-ton tank that you're seeing here, one of the greatest and most seminal, influential tank designs ever. And yes, it's got Vickers and 6 in the name, just like the Vickers Mark 6 does.
As well as 5 dozen Carden-Lloyd tankettes.
You got it right this time, though.
And while not large by World War II standards, Thailand was able to field about 60,000 well-equipped and trained men in 4 separate armies.
Yet again, there are neither Frenchmen nor Thais anywhere in this picture. Wrong year, wrong conflict.
Indochina faced a dire predicament. Though the army was not significantly smaller at 50,000 men,
Buddha Tipsyfish, when you are including Charles de Gaulle, Supreme Commander of the Free French and passionate enemy of the Vichy French, hunting them down to the ends of the earth like a Terminator, as Vichy French, you have attained boner enlightenment.
only 12,000 of these were regular.
Well, he doesn't come up with anything half as bad after that, if it's even possible.
Within its own borders.
But this is a fairly minor boner since they are Frenchmen and in the correct year.
Native rebellions plagued the colony.
These really are the early Viet Minh. Well done.
Against Thai armor, the French could only field one operational tank company.
No, this is one of those things people use in World of Tanks or War Thunder, but not real life.
A World War I era light tank, the Renault FT. While they had a more powerful navy, that being a light cruiser and 4 medium-sized warships, their air force was considerably inferior. First, and the British in India and beyond prevented Vichy ships from ever reaching the distant colony.
And yet again, nothing to do with Thailand versus Vichy France.
In the first few days of fighting, Thai
Yet another weapon system that shouldn't be in this. It never went anywhere near Southeast Asia.
pilots took the skies and never relinquished them. The Grand War was a little different. Just a week into the conflict, the Thai army gained control of Laos.
Maybe the Thai army did, but this ain't the Thai army, this is the Japanese army.
And most of the Mekong River's western bank. Advances into Cambodia proved more difficult, however.
He's now using a war from half a century earlier again, but at least it's between the right nations. Wait till you see how far he's prepared to take it.
Thailand sent the bulk of its invasion forces into the disputed Cambodian province
Surely you jest.
of Battambang, but strong resistance from native colonial rifles.
Once again, a picture luridly out of place. Troops of the Japanese puppet state, the Empire of Manchukuo. Ironically, all he had to do was use this correct photo again.
Native colonial rifles, and the thick jungle made unit coordination almost impossible.
Oh yeah, watch out for that thick jungle, gentlemen officers of His Majesty, the Tsar of all the Russias.
It was only a handful of legionnaires.
This time we use men from France's heartbreaking attempt to hold on to her Indo-Chinese Empire after World War II, fighting the Vietnamese communists.
That managed to prevent a complete rout, as they managed to blow apart some of the Thai tanks.
This time, you've sleepwalked into actually getting the Vickers 6-ton light tank right, but fumbled the ball by using the wrong variant.
And helped the
For the remaining several minutes of his video, he doesn't really make any mistakes, I'm pleased to say, and does a creditable account of the politics that followed the war, as he was pretty good with the politics before and during it as well. In closing, I want to say I love what Tipsyfish is doing. He's doing just what I'm trying to do, making mini documentaries to inform people about history and the sheer complexity of it. But he also provides a fine object lesson in how influences do change things, and cobble together reasons why it's acceptable to do so. He pronounces Peeble's name differently both times, getting it much closer to the mark the second time.
And a monument was constructed, the Victory Monument in Bangkok, to commemorate the victory over a European power. What the ceasefire...
The reason he rationalizes why it's acceptable to use intentionally misleading photos is that he's trying to make money out of this and shouldn't fritter money away on too much copyright. I won't pass judgment on those priorities. I just want to say, always be on your guard when getting your information from YouTube. Thank you, and please join me while I explore two more of them, the Iraq and Iran volumes. And now, folks, let's look at his treatment of the British campaign in Iraq in 1941. Again, very good history, but the visuals are willfully misleading. Let's go.
That tends to not get mentioned much in the retelling of history.
And in our opening boner of the video, the faraway conflict on the steppes of Russia, which hasn't actually happened yet, being misrepresented as Iraq.
This is the British invasion of Iraq. Iraq came under British control following the end of World War I. The nation was established...
As usual, he gives spot-on potted history here, including the all-important fact that the British had bases in Iraq with the consent of the Iraqis. And he even gets a succession of photos right.
Granted the British military base rights and unrestricted troop transport throughout the nation.
And although photos of the British on those military bases are easily come by, we have to misrepresent Turks in World War I.
By 1937, few British troops were left in the territory.
Again, a photo of Turkish troops from long before being misrepresented as British in 1937.
However, as war brewed in Europe, two British air bases in Iraq would see reinforcement, one being near Basra and...
Amazingly, he has chosen an airfield in Iceland, and by the way, in the future. This is one of several neutral countries that the good guys violated. For example, Greenland, the Faroe Islands, Iran, Portuguese Timor, and Thailand.
Another in Habana.
Habania, actually. Don't look for Habiana. And this time he got the picture right. I want to stress again, the information he is giving is very good.
These bases were used to secure British oil interests in the region, and at the start of the Second World War, would also act as training bases and recruitment centers for British troops in the region.
Please banish any thought that these men are training in Iraq. Very hot and nasty. Not counting it towards the bone account, though.
And in March of the following year, the nationalist and anti-British Rashid Ali replaced Nur al-Assad as Prime Minister of Iraq.
Note to self, never get a lopsided Hitler mustache. You will only look like a complete dork.
And the Italian Legion in Baghdad became the chief center for Axis propaganda and for fomenting anti-British feelings within the Middle East.
And if you're wondering why everyone in the Middle East looks Japanese, it's because these are the Japanese Americans going into internment.
On April the 1st of 1941, Rashid Ali and a section of pro-German senior military officers...
No doubt at this stage you're wondering, why did he get rid of the daggy Hitler mo? It's because it isn't him. We've actually substituted the leader of the Palestinians now, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, a personal friend of Hitler and Himmler, who was much feted on his tours of the Third Reich, where he would meet Muslim SS units and give Hitler salutes, which have become an ingrained habit among Palestinian militants, little reported in the mainstream media. Anyway, the battle lines are drawn. Let's see the battle order.
The British in the region at the start of the conflict had around 24,000 men raised and equipped under the overall command of Major General William Fraser.
Well, I'll admit getting his first name wrong is only a minor boner. But I sense a disturbance in the farce. Let's play the order of battle in simulcast with the order of battle sequence from his invasion of Iran video.
The British had around 24,000 men raised and equipped. Under the overall command of Major General William Fraser, under the command of Lieutenant General Edward Quinlan.
This is like the boner final boss you have to overcome to progress to the next level. How did you do this? Why did you do this? No, this is what Edward Quinlan looked like, and again on our left.
This force included a handful of British regulars, as well as a slew of colonial troops from around the area. Many of which had been transported from India or locally raised militia units. Local Iraqi militia units.
Local Iraqi units? But you're in Iran this time, not Iraq. So not only have you run the same info for two different conflicts, but when you did plonk in a specific clause, you put it in the wrong video.
The British also had an armoured car company made up of 18 Rolls-Royce armoured cars. made during the early 1920s. The company also had two functional large tanks and a single Cardin Lloyd tanket.
And hey, how come all these Vickers Mark 6 light tanks in Iran aren't, which he falsely ascribed to Thailand earlier, remember, anywhere in his orders of battle?
They could field around 100 aircraft, which was a mix of Gloucester Gladiator biplanes and a handful of other types. Which would include a mix of Gloucester Gladiators, the Hawker Odyx, Hawker Hart light bombers, and a handful of other craft.
That information was pretty sound. Now it's boner time.
The British Navy in the area consisted of 4 patrol boats, later reinforced by the aircraft carrier the HMS Hermes.
Bonosaurus! Look, please don't go blaming this one on being nearly deaf.
Forces under Iraq were comprised of around 60,000 men.
He now proceeds to use the flag that Saddam Hussein introduced in 1991, not the flag that Iraq actually did have 50 years before that.
Most in 4 infantry divisions and 1 mechanized brigade. Within the mechanized brigade, it comprised of a light tank company.
Holy boner, Batmullah! That's not an Iraqi tank at all, that is an Iranian one. This is high-grade shit. Spoiler alert, he then goes on not to include it in Iran's order of battle when we come to the Iran video.
Armored car company, 2 battalions of motorized infantry, and an artillery brigade. The Iraqi army, while fairly decently equipped, was not particularly well trained.
Send in the boners! Look, if the Iraqis had had Crusader tanks, they would have blown the British to kingdom come. Alas, all the Iraqis had was these pitiful little fuckers here, Italian L3 tankettes. Ah, there's a boner, haha. No dust cloud. Oh shit, it's my boner, this is my animation. Alright, it'll be fixed by the time I do my videos, Tales of the Tankette Age.
When fighting erupted, it was centered largely around the British base at Habyana, which the Iraqis were besieging. On May the 2nd, the British launched a series of airstrikes against the Iraqi-held positions.
The boner has landed. Spitfire in Italy 2 years later.
And throughout the day, the pilots from Habyana flew 193 sorties.
And if they'd had the mighty P-40, they would have shot the Iraqis down in droves. Come on!
And claimed direct hits on Iraqi transports, armored cars, and artillery pieces.
Could anybody, even someone coming through our schools these days, not know that is a B-25 Mitchell from the future?
The attack surprised the Iraqis.
Strangely, here we see it surprising the Afghans 60 years earlier.
Which included the government. Many of the soldiers in the army thought that they were merely on a training mission.
Again, we're not seeing Iraqis, we're seeing a 60-year-old photo of faraway Afghans.
The government didn't expect that the British would actually fight.
You are seeing King Abdul Aziz, the founder of modern Saudi Arabia. True titan among men. No one ever thought he was the government of Iraq. Yet Tipsyfish passes this off as various European embassies in Iran in another video, though there's no white guys anywhere in it.
And instead would settle for a negotiated surrender. But if you know the British, you know that they're really damn stubborn.
Again, could there be anyone who doesn't know this is the famous photo of the British surrendering at Singapore to the Japanese?
For 3 more days, British aircrafts would rule the skies, launching heavy attacks on not only Iraqi supply lines.
Houston, we have boner. Honestly, Tipsyfish, why did you try this? No one's going to be fooled.
But also airfields in major cities. Iraqi reinforcements were spotted a few miles.
The legendary Renault FT-17 tank in the picture tells you it couldn't be Iraq.
Away from the base, and RAF pilots gunned down hundreds, if not thousands.
Boner 22 is that familiar star of Catch 22, the B-25 Mitchell. American, not British.
The Germans had been informed of the ongoing war.
Yet what we are shown is a visit to Turkey 20 years later by the simperingly innocent state of West Germany.
Aren't I lucky I got a chunky bit?
This would include a number of German aircraft under the command of Colonel Werner Junk.
No, that's not Werner Junk. But if you have a mind to show the right guy, finding photos of him is child's play.
This force would number around 24 craft, all while attacking British held positions.
Such a pity he leaves out the fun fact that they pretended not to be German. They repainted their planes in Iraqi colours, but nobody with an IQ bigger than his shoe size was ever fooled. What with no Iraqis having ever logged a flying hour in one of these types. Ever.
But by the 18th of May, he had lost around 30 of his air force. Habyana was secured by the mid of May, and reinforced.
Alas, the allure of irrelevant photos proved too tempting yet again.
Forced by troops from Palestine and Transjordan, the British went on the offensive. Faced with the British advance, the Iraqi government of Rashid Ali collapsed. On June the 2nd, Jamal al-Gaddafi was named Prime Minister of Iraq.
Wrong guy yet again. This is indeed a former Prime Minister of Iraq 3 times. But he had been assassinated 4 years earlier than this. As for the guy you should be showing, Midfi, not Gaddafi, he looked like this. Admittedly, that's terribly grainy, but that's him there.
While a pro-British
there are no more mistakes in the rest of it, so I hope you'll join me for the 3rd part, where I will pick apart in the same manner his video of the British and Soviet invasion of Iran that followed. It's got just as many heinous boners in it, so let's go, please join me. And that brings us to the 3rd sample I've chosen, which is his volume on the Anglo-Soviet invasion of Iran in 1941.
Troops would bleed into northwestern Iran, with Persian tribal and irregular forces soon entering the fray.
Our first misrepresentation is a fairly bearable one. It's just decades out of place, that's all.
The Russians had also blockaded Kherson, the main grain fields of Iran, and took possession of the animals of burden in the region, utterly destroying the food situation in the state.
But this time we're passing off Canadians in France moving ammunition as Russian soldiers getting in touch with their inner Dutch Green politician and looting the livestock from Iran's farmers. Whoa!
The British occupied northern Iran in 1919.
Another one way out of place. These British Gurkha troops are actually far away from Iran.
To enforce their oil drilling rights in the state, hold influence in another way.
This one too is really from the infamous borderlands region of Afghanistan and British India, the Raj.
The Russians had a brigade of Persian Cossacks.
Yes, they had a Persian Cossack brigade, all right, but this ain't it. This is a peaceable expedition deep inside the Russian Empire.
That had been established in the 1870s, made up of largely ethnic Persians, but it had Russian officers.
It sure did, but this ain't it either. This is the far less impressive force that Britain raised in her occupied zone of Persia. The short-lived South Persian Rifles. We'll see more of them later, still being passed off as the wrong thing when we do see them. And just hang on a minute. These are foot soldiers. Do you have to pass off foot soldiers as the expert horsemen, the Cossacks?
This force was expanded to around 8,000 men during World War I.
No, he's misrepresenting the South Persia Rifles again, shown here in 1918, shortly before their final disbandment.
And served as one of the main forces that fought against the Ottoman Empire in the region.
Oh no, you didn't. These are the genocidal maniacs employed by the Ottoman Empire to slaughter Armenian civilians. They're not fighting against the Ottomans, and no one deserves to be mistaken for these turds.
And as it was effectively the only standing army for the state at the time, it was used to curb various movements across the land. This man, Reza Khan. Reza Khan had joined the brigade when he was 16 years old, and he became the first Iranian to be appointed as Brigadier General of the brigade.
Now hear this. The man you are showing us is not the Shah. He's redder than a rutting baboon's butt cheeks. This is a revolutionary.
He had risen rapidly through the ranks of the brigade following the British Purge.
Different photo, same boner, but it's a good one.
About a month later, under British direction, Reza would lead 3,000 to 4,000 men to Tehran, arriving on February the 21st, and he would seize the capital.
Good. Very far removed from being the British-backed Shah seizing the capital. This is Russian troops in Iran.
The brigade, with a strength of 7,000 to 8,000 men at the time, was merged with other forces to form the new Iranian army.
Oh, yet again, men dedicated to overthrowing the state are being passed off as the shining hope of the state, the founders of its army.
Either state. Iran had a long-time relationship with the Germans.
And that time in a Tipsyfish video has come when you have to dredge out the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Amin al-Husseini, and misrepresent him as something different. This time we're making him an Iranian. Now, in his video on the 1941 Anglo-Iraqi War, Tipsyfish actually had the nerve to present the same picture as the PM of Iraq, Rashid Ali.
Relations between Britain and Iran.
Now, I've been omitting the many pictures he shows that are appropriate, and here are two scores: the Australian man who pioneered the Anglo-Persian oil drilling, and an early eureka moment of striking oil in Iran. He actually represents these photos correctly. Sadly for someone in a position to inform the public, he slavishly regurgitates the cynical Allied propaganda line that Iran brought it all on herself by failing to be a good neutral.
Iran would claim neutrality, but they kept trading with the Germans, and they refused to break off diplomatic ties with them or expel the German nationals that were in the nation.
That is, by refusing to break off diplomatic ties with Germany and Italy, or to expel those countries as citizens. Hello, did we urge them to expel Allied citizens too? Or is there no objection to them being nice to our side? I, for one, call what ensued. When all is said and done, hundreds of Iranian mothers lost their children to this obscene gang rape job.
Offered one of the easiest ways to supply the Soviets with lend-lease supplies. This became a major factor as U-boat attacks in the winter ice made convoys to Arkhangельsk.
I don't expect everyone to know how to pronounce Arkhangelsk, but read what it says. Now note the widely separated sounds like these L's being shunted luridly out of place in the retelling, or these G sounds here in blue, and marvel at the idea that they are pronounced with a silent gill. How could you think that? Just read what you're given. I'm not going to throw you a free pass on this one for being deaf, Tipsyfish, because it's about visual clues.
Where to? Hospital. Oh no, I hate hospitals.
And therefore, sheer lack of curiosity.
Convoys to Arkhangельsk, the Soviets also had invested interest in northwestern Iran and eventually turned the whole of Iran into a communist state.
Whoa, now that's a boner and a half. This is actually the United States Army, no less. The 339th Regiment, who fought in the Russian Civil War. We've noticed their Russian slogan, it means, the bayonet decides. They're not communists trying to subvert Iran. This is a good one. We'll explain why they're in the Russian Civil War. America was another time. Time to recycle that mishmash from the Iraq video.
Under the command of Lieutenant General Edward Quinman.
And we succeed in totally belly flopping out in a different way this time.
This included a handful of British regulars, as well as a slew of colonial troops from around the area, many of which had been transported from India or local Iraqi militia units.
This is what happens when you telescope facts onto something else where they're not factual and hope no one will notice.
The British also had an armored car company made up of 18 Rolls-Royce armored cars made during the early 1920s. The company also had 2 functional large tanks and a single Carden-Loyd tankette.
That information has been transplanted straight out of the Battle of Habbaniyah, Iraq. It shouldn't be in this video. That's a Carden-Loyd tankette, by the way, and yes, that is a real 1930s photo. These are the 2 large tanks they had in the information you just heard. Their names were Seal and Walrus. I'm looking forward to telling you a funny story about them in the bit after the credits.
The invasion took Iran by surprise.
And that flag takes me by surprise, though by now it shouldn't. That is the flag of today's Iran. It is 40 years out of its place. I think you were looking for the monarchical flag that you see here. Oh.
The Imperial Iranian Navy boasted around 9 divisions.
No, it didn't. It was a bathtub navy. You're thinking of the army, aren't you?
The first and second of which enjoyed attached tank support. This was in the form of 100 Renault FT tanks from World War I and around 50 Panzer 38s.
And for our nice round figure of 20th boner, we've got the wrong tank. Now, it was actually made by the Czechs and bought by Iran before anyone ever came up with the tank that would be called the 38T by Germany. And irony of ironies, Tipsyfish actually acknowledged the existence of this fascinating thing, but in the wrong army. He put it in the Iraqi army in his Iraq video that you just watched my critique of.
Iran had also acquired 50 AVI-4 tankets.
First, the complete dog's breakfast he made of the name of the thing. Have a look at that. Can you make AVI 4 Alpha Victor India 4 out of that? But this is not the boner number 21 that brings us together now. Now if you're thinking, hey, isn't that pile of shit that my brother's friends tossed together in the backyard out of scrap and Mum didn't know where the bin lid had gone for ages and they wouldn't let me in it because, well, look, what it is a Morris Martel. Yeah, grown-ups actually built this and it could move, but it sure as shit wasn't sold to Iran as a tankette. You're looking at this. This is the AH-4, and all three of these images of it I'm showing are in Iranian service and in Iranian markings. It was a cute Dalek sort of thing that punched way above its weight category in the history of tanks, even fighting in the Horn of Africa in the 1980s. Strictly speaking, this was a heavy tankette. And how metal is that? Heavy tankette. Can you feel it? Ironclad.
Oh, please don't waste my time with that bullshit.
Yes!
Yes, yes,
Yes!
yes, yes.
Tanks? Might as well put your pronouns on your bio. Cream puff stuff.
Yes!
Yes, yes,
Yes!
yes, yes.
Artillery? Look, we ain't going against soggy Kleenex. This is a job that calls for heavy tankettes.
Yes!
Yes, yes.
Tank destroyers? Couldn't destroy a brain cell. Armoured car? Second best to a Femidom.
Yes!
But not the rescue racer from HR Puff and stuff.
At the start of the invasion, the most critical British objective.
And despite pictures of Abadan at this date being public domain, and he even uses one, he's got to use a well-known location in America for some reason.
Was securing the oil fields at Kurdistan, centered around the city of Abadan, before they could be sabotaged. The British naval and paratrooper detachment landed at the city.
That's his cue to show some men in faraway Norwegian waters.
The Iranians managed to put up a resistance, but the city and the refinery were captured that afternoon. More troops were landed at Khorram Sharma.
Khorramshahr, my ass, you can see from the backdrop it's Tehran, but even though the photos of the men in the battle he's talking about are public domain, he still has to use something from 2 years in the future, just looking very peaceful.
More troops were landed at Khorram Sharma the same afternoon, capturing the city and the important naval port, destroying 2 Iranian sloops that were still at dock.
Wrong. It was not the British Army. It was the Australian Navy. And I am not proud of this. Australian warships Yarra and Canimbla were the absolute spear point of the Allied assault on Iran, hitting the Barbara at dawn. It was the moral equivalent of Pearl Harbor. 10 salvos were blasted into the moored vessel the Barbara and her sleeping sailors. Look at them, neutrals sleeping at 4 a.m. when their comrades got murdered in a great power game, cloaked in excuses about Nazis.
The commander of the Navy, who oversaw the troop actions in the region, Gulamani Barandor, was killed during this action.
It is pleasant to note that a warship of today is named in his honor.
This resulted in very little organized resistance in the whole province thereafter.
So he dredges out yet another photo of a civil war 32 years earlier.
The British reached the outskirts of Avaz on August the 27th and were blocked by heavy Iranian defenses.
Did you really use a man with an obvious Kalashnikov for World War II? Oh my god, you did! Look, if just being Persian makes any image fit for use, then how about you try this public domain image? Or just go straight for this one. You know, I'm not entirely above remaking your video in that vein.
Although the Iranians had taken heavy losses and their morale was decreased,
Must you show a T-34? I'm not even going to increase the boner count on this one.
they were prepared to fight hard. The Indian Army advance came to a halt.
This is not the Indian Army, this is the Red Army.
However, after sporadic fighting, word had reached out.
This Crusader tank was not used in the invasion of Iran in August 41.
Yes, the two sides had agreed to a ceasefire.
Don't plonk in a Sherman tank either, please. It's too early where I am.
The Soviets in the north launched their invasion on the 25th. They gained air
Obvious British planes. Look, do you want some public domain images of the Red Air Force?
superiority within hours.
Lee Grant tank, you're still doing it. Good news though, it still counts as boner number 29.
The Soviets attacked both towns on the 26th, and while the Iranians held out for some time, the lack of food and ammo eventually.
These potent war machines belong far in the future when the Red Army becomes closer to the god of war. Apart from Boner 25, he does a good job of describing major combat operations.
The Shah called for a ceasefire, but from Iran, the Iranians would have to assure that the German minister and his staff would end up leaving Tehran, and the German, Italian, Hungarian, and Romanian embassies would.
He has luridly misrepresented this photo from episode to episode, but at least he claimed they were Arabs in the Iraq video. This time, he has the nerve to pass them off as a gaggle of European peoples. God. It is unmistakably the founder of modern Saudi Arabia in his own country.
The government didn't expect that the British would actually fight, and instead would settle for a negotiated surrender.
I can't believe you showed the wrong side surrendering. That's the British at Singapore.
And all remaining German nationals, including the families, the last order would mean almost certain imprisonment.
This is being passed off as the forced deportation of those Axis countries' nationals, but don't they look suspiciously more like labourers than the ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary?
Fearing the execution, many people fled the city. Raza, in a handwritten letter by.
This photo has been much misrepresented on the net by barrow-pushing propagandists of various shades, but this time it's pleasingly comical.
Floyd announced his abdication as the Soviets entered the city on September the 17th. However, the heir to the throne was a British citizen who spoke no Persian.
Speaking of matters comical, there is no way in heaven or on earth that this proto-Bluto you see here could be mistaken for the trim, noble and aquiline Shah Muhammad Reza Pahlavi, who old folks like me cherish in our memory as the Shah of Persia. Before the super mistake of 1979 and all the black turbans, pointless frowning and child soldiering that it ushered in. Ask yourself whether some black turbaned arch mullah opposed to all bodily functions as totally evil could pull crowds like this great man pulled when he visited Australia. There he is at the Australian War Memorial, presenting a wreath and his gorgeous Shah Banu looking at paintings of parrots.
The heir to the throne was a British citizen who spoke no Persian. So instead, Crown Prince Mohammad Rashid Pahlavi became the next Shah of Iran. Iran would declare war on Germany.
There is absolutely no need to dredge out a photo of a Shah of the previous dynasty about 60 years before the events you're using it for,
which qualified it for membership in the United Nations. The effects of the war were very disruptive for Iran, though.
Overdue compliment time. This actually is a Jewish refugee camp in occupied Iran. Thank you. But straight into another raging boner.
The Soviets appropriated most of the harvest in northern Iran.
Wow, this time it's the National Guard in the USA in Spartanburg, South Carolina. How did you do this?
Leading to food shortages.
Gratuitous, out of place, long ago uprising photo again.
For the general public. The British and Soviet occupiers used the delivery of grain as a bargaining chip.
Well, Alibaba and the 40 boners, congratulations on pulling out another famous American photograph and passing it off as Soviets in Iran.
But the food situation, no pun intended, so badly that it not only led to widespread famine, but also heavily crippled the economy.
This is the Bengal famine in India, not Iran.
The Soviets had attempted during their occupation to stir tensions between the tenant farmers and the landlords.
Wow, if it's landlords you want, how about the royal family of 50 years earlier?
The Soviet-backed People's Republic of Azerbaijan was formed. The Iranian government sent troops to re-establish control, but
You're kidding me. These are the Free Poles. They've signed on to go fight the Germans anywhere in the world they can find them, not to intervene in an Iranian civil war.
United Nations Security Council.
And the rest of the video is an accurate presentation. So to recap, folks, the message I'm sending you is please don't trust everything you see in documentaries on YouTube, and that includes what I tell you. Please always do your own fact checking. And thank you, Tipsyfish. I hope you're a good sport about this. Good night, everyone. Thank you for watching my humble one-man effort this far. Now here's your reward. Now, YouTube channel J-Man Time is phenomenal. I want to speak well of it, but I hope it will not be considered churlish of me to point out a well-meaning but hilarious boner he makes in his video about Iraq. By the way, I presume he would look like Fat Albert.
The most interesting armored fighting vehicle on the list, and these were actually used by the British forces, and these were the tanks that were nicknamed Walrus and Tyleen.
No, it was not named Tyleen. Their names were Walrus and Seal, and the Russian word for seal is Tulen. Tulen. So, at some point this has been filtered through a Russian website, filtered then through Google Translate, and passed undigested. It's a well-meaning boner, not at all misleading. Thank you, J-Man Time. Please check out his channel. He did not pay me to say this. I just give unprompted rave reviews. He's a prodigy, and thank you for watching my video.